Welcome back to EU Decoded, the podcast from the EPP Group in the European Parliament.
Today, we are going to discuss the issue of the EU tariffs. In the studio, I welcome Mrs. Zeljana Zovko, member of the European Parliament from Croatia and Vice Chair of the EPP Group and member of the Delegation for Relations with the United States, and Mr. Jörgen Warborn, member of the European Parliament from Sweden and EPP Group's coordinator on the International Trade Committee. So, what is this about? The US wants to implement tariffs on imported goods, including those goods from the European Union. Tariffs are actually nothing else than taxes. These taxes aim to protect domestic industries. However, they could have an impact on jobs, but also on tax revenue, because you are selling less. You are going to have less VAT, less consumption taxes, less international trade, and at the end, higher consumer prices. President Trump thinks the US are ripped off by the Europeans. But we think that the EU-US good and services trade is balanced. Let's listen to Owen Dray. Owen Dray is a senior researcher in the Wilfried Martin Center for European Studies. He specialized in macroeconomics and social policy. He's also an expert in the political economy of the European Union.
As we know, President Trump is really obsessed about the trade balance. But actually, while the EU has, a significant trade surplus with the US in terms of goods, when it comes to services, which is by far the much faster growing, economic area, then the EU has a significant deficit with the United States. And I think it's something like 190 or 200 billion euros, which is, very, very, very significant. And that mainly relates to digital services. So every time, you use Google or Meta or X or any of those American services, that's part of the trade imbalance. That's the reality.
Tariffs can lead to reduced imports from the European Union. However, they can also provoke retaliatory measures from the European Union, especially if we don't find a solution in the 90 days negotiation period. But how these measures could impact US businesses and consumers? Also, could these measures lead to a trade war between the USA and the EU? And what is the position of the EPP Group? Mrs. Zovko?
Position of the EPP Group is, first of all, to stay united in front of the threats that we have received from the other side and the threats that also menace the world trade regulations in a sense that we assigned to. European Union has the biggest single market in the world, and we are committed to open as many possibilities as we can. We are making bilateral deals with like-minded partners. We are opening ourselves to trade with Mercosur, with India, with Indonesia, with Norway, and also with Australia and New Zealand. So we are diversifying our options as well in front of the menace that we are having from the new administration in the United States. But also we are not giving in to dialogue to try to explain the specificities of European Union's composition, regulations, that is very complex even for our citizens, let alone for Washington. Every time we go there and try to explain that some certain issues that Americans find unjust cannot be changed. For example, VAT, that remains a competence of each member state, and it's not something that we have invented, should be also explained the same way that Americans have their tax based on the local tax system. So in a way, complexity of European Union is very difficult to be translated into simple English, but we understand that they are basically orientated towards American workers and American publics, but also we are doing the same for our workers. And we have to find ourselves in a compromise, how to get out of this difficult situation, because we need the United States of America. We need them first for our security. We need them as well in cooperation in order to respond to geopolitical threats that we are facing. And this was the best relationships that we had since the creation of European Union. So there is no way that one administration change can break these bridges.
Mr. Warborn?
First of all, it's totally correct that the trade balance is what is mentioned. There is an unbalance between goods and services, but on balance, there is a slight trade surplus for EU to US. I think Trump is exaggerating it, and I think he is only using goods as his numbers. And therefore he sets up tariffs because he believes in tariffs. I do not believe in tariff. I believe that tariffs will make goods more expensive for consumers, and both on the EU side and on the US side, we need to reduce prices for consumers. We have inflationary pressures, and we need to release that. And that's why we need to respond to this, not because I like tariffs, as I said, I dislike them, but to make the US, to force them in a sense, to come to the negotiation table. That's why we need to put up our tariffs with the aim of negotiating and get rid of the tariffs, because then trade can start to flow freely, and that would be the best for EU citizens and US citizens.
Let's go on. Now I have another question for both of you. What could be the long-term effects of sustained tariffs on EU-USA trade relations? Mrs. Zovko?
It will be detrimental for citizens and for American citizens as well. Lack of opportunity as well for the goods to be used to and that Americans are used to from European market to be competitive with the ones that we will have from the other markets, and that we will have an increase in inflation, and it will not benefit from any sides of this transatlantic relations. We know that 16 million jobs have depend on this. Once you stop investing, once you stop having this relationship, it's very difficult to go back. It's an open market and anyone can take a place. If you close one door, the other's door opens. So it will be very difficult to restart this relation. We don't want to get dragged into a trade war, and we don't want to consider some other options and the worst case scenario. Basically, my role in the EPP as a vice president is also to reach out to American administration and to explain the benefits and to find out the ways that we can do in order to find a compromise. And also, as EPP shadow rapporteur for EU-US trade, I think that we should be much more positive and work on a positive side. But I think that we have to get involved in the mutual benefits from the fact that the European Union has for many years depended on United States of America and cannot really adapt so easily to new circumstances. And in this transition, everybody has to find their own interest, and we have to come out with a win-win situation.
Mr. Warborn?
If the tariffs are kept on both sides, it will be more expensive for Europeans. It will be more complicated for EU businesses to sell their goods and services to the US. And eventually that will create a problem for US. We have seen this in the past when tariffs have been used, then productivity fall. And it will be a problem for the US economy. And I think they will realize eventually. And that's why we have to avoid that situation. We have to come back to a situation where we trade more. Remember that US is a really important market for us. About 20% of our export goes to the US market. But we are also very important to the US market. So there is all the reasons in the world to make sure that we avoid having this trade war.
In this point, let's listen to the opinion of Paul McCarthy. Paul McCarthy is a former Europe director of the International Republican Institute, and he works now as an independent expert on European politics and transatlantic relations in the United States.
I think as an American citizen, and I think what Trump is most concerned about would be what the American voter sees. I think that we're going to come to an agreement where it won't be as bad, but tariffs will be historically high, but not as bad as we thought that they would be. Trump's method, I don't know what's going on inside of his head at any moment, and I don't think anybody does, but I think the method is to go in big and then bring it down. Even though what's left is historically high, it seems a lot less than it was. So Trump is going to get his tariffs, but hopefully they won't be so terrible that they really impact transatlantic trade, because that could impact transatlantic relations.
Tariff disputes can strain diplomatic relationships, as they are often seen as an aggressive economic policy. The imposition of tariffs can lead to increased tensions and challenges in other political and economic issues affecting the broader transatlantic relationship. Let's listen once again to Paul McCarthy.
I don't think the transatlantic, even with the tariffs, transatlantic relations will not be irreparably harmed. There may be increased tensions, but at the end of the day, I am a big believer, and I've been working on this for 30 years now, I'm a big believer that the U.S. and Europe are natural allies with each other. There's going to be bumps in the road. People forget that we didn't have an easy time. Let me bring you back 40 years. Ronald Reagan was not a universally popular figure in Europe. They thought he was going to bring on, World War III and everything like that. And I remember that because I was in Europe at the time. There were huge demonstrations. There were differences of opinion, even on the center right, with the Reagan's Republican Party at the time. So a lot of tensions. We have long had differences of opinion, but we've managed to work them out. And even with Trump, I think at the end of the day, and I think Trump's beginning to realize this, he's going to need Europe, if only for other geopolitical projects to work together on, in particular China.
Mrs. Zovko, do you agree with this point of view? How might the imposition of USA tariffs on EU goods influence diplomatic and political relationships between the two sides of the Atlantic?
It already creates constraints, but we have European leaders competing to go and to meet Trump. That shows as well the certainty that these links will never be irreparably damaged. We just have to understand more how to speak in more transactional language, the way that President Trump is doing. We have seen that he already has made a deal with UK. He's making a deal even with China. So we have to find out as well how far we are flexible in sending the right envoy to cut the deal in his way of doing the business. I recently read a very good analysis by Jan Bremer, which says that in this global order that is being created, we have on one side China, and that is one-party system and decided by, and controlled economy decided by one man, and the total capture of institution by the one-party system. East Europeans have gone through this and they know very well how that looks like, and that's the last thing that we should turn to. And on the other side, we have a capture of institution by private businessmen that are still not understanding the way regulated Europe functions. So we have to find this middle way in order to explain what added value United States has in keeping close to European Union as a global as well soft power. We have 44 agreements covering 76 countries. I mean, UK has understood that very well when they did the Brexit. After the Brexit, that they have to go and make a deal with each country separately. So they understood the shock that they received after Brexit. So the soft power that still remains with European Union will be needed by United States of America. And I'm sure that if we are patient enough and if we are reasonable enough in our approach and to put down the tension and the messaging from both sides of the Atlantic, that we will find this middle way as well.
Mr. Warborn?
Well, of course it does. Of course it does. But I think it's also important to say that the transatlantic link is very important. It is not least important in these times when we have war in Europe, Russia's full-scale illegal invasion of Ukraine, and therefore we need each other. And Europe needs US and US needs Europe here. But still, that's why the tariff that US has imposed of us is, well, they are not justified, they are not according to WTO rules, and we, of course, have to react in a proportionate, in a balanced way, and in a WTO-compatible way. I say that because I mean balanced in the sense that if they hurt us with tariffs, we have to use tariffs as well in order to make them come to the negotiation table. Balanced in the sense that no single country in Europe, because tariffs hurts ourselves as well, no single country can take all the burden, or no single sector or branch can take the burden. It has to be balanced. And WTO compatible, that is really key here, because we rely on WTO, on the World Trade Organization, on their rules. We need the rules-based open trade system. Here we differ from the US. They tend not to see that as important, but it really is, and it is for the rest of the world. And I like that the Commission now has put this case with the US tariffs on the dispute to check this within the WTO if this is compatible or not from Trump's side. I believe it is not, and I think that will be clarified in WTO, and that is good. But to summarize, we need each other. The transatlantic link is strong, historically has been strong, and I hope that we can come back on track again.
In the worst-case scenario, which is we find no solution in the negotiations, what could be the potential economic and political implications for the EU due to these tariffs? Mr. Warborn?
Well, first of all, what we have to do is, of course, to plan for that can happen. And one of the things we are doing is that we are pushing for other free trade agreements, because if it gets more complicated to do business with the US, then we have to help, as policymakers, we have to help businesses to make business in other parts of the world. And that's why it's so important that we push the Mercosur agreement over the finishing line, that we put the Mexico agreement over the finishing line, that we pull full speed on the negotiations with India, the Philippines, Indonesia, and also start work again with Australia. If we do that, I think we will be able to balance a bit the situation we have with the US trade. And also the single market. We have to work on our own market, because that is really the most important part to show strength. And we have strength. We should be confident in Europe with the single market. We are actually a bigger market than the US market. And that is also important when we negotiate with them, saying that, yes, you can sell your products to all 450 million Europeans, but we also would like to sell our products to your citizens.
What is the best strategy to minimize the impact of the tariffs, and how the EU policymakers could address the issue of USA tariffs? Let's listen again to Owen Dray.
My personal opinion is that patience is key here. There should be no immediate reactions, and I think what we should be doing in this period is focusing less on what's going on in Washington and more what we can do in Europe to the single market to reduce tariffs, because we saw in the Draghi report and his subsequent research that, failing to complete the single market is putting a tariff of, 40-50% on goods and over 100% on services. So I think we should really just focus on ourselves and come what may with the United States.
Now, Mr. Warborn, do you agree? Don't you think that shifts in the US trade policy may create new opportunities for EU trade diversification? We can have more trade agreements with other parts of the world. What the EPP Group thinks about it?
Well, I wouldn't say opportunity, but I would say it's a good strategy. It's a good strategy to work with the single market. It's a good strategy to work with more free trade agreements. And we have to, in Europe, we have to sort out our energy situation. I would say that is really important for our businesses. And of course, to work more on reducing the regulatory burden, because we have it's too much red tape in Europe, and we are creating rules for ourselves that makes it very problematic to do business in Europe. We have to get rid of that. If we do that, we can come back to competitiveness, we can come back to growth, we can come back to creating jobs and prosperity for citizens in Europe.
Mrs. Zovko?
I absolutely agree that we should focus also on strengthening our single market, and the first trade partners that are ourselves in and the closest neighborhood. Sometimes we have so many burdens on our businesses and on placing our goods on the market within the European Union, and that makes it impossible for them to trade. Maybe this opportunity, while waiting for our American partners to reach out as well to European Union as the most safe and the best market for them, the best opportunity is to strengthen our single market that can also mitigate the damage that can arise from the issues that we are having in transatlantic trade. We are speeding up trade agreements with Mercosur, which is quite unbelievable, taking into account all the opposition that we had even within the European Parliament. Now Europeans have understood that some compromises will have to be made in order to open our businesses to this and open and give opportunity to our businesses to place their goods on this huge market. So Mexico as well, Indonesia, we invest a lot in development aid, we invest a lot in multilateral organizations, but we are not getting in return the benefits that we should have. This is something that Americans have learned long time ago. I mean, they use their popular culture, they use their soft diplomacy as well to protect their economic interests. And this is something that the European Union should learn as well in their diplomacy, to act much more assertively and to be much more self-confident, because we are the best place for living and for having families, the most safest single market. We have free movement of people, free movement of goods. So people are aspiring the most World Heritage sites in European Union. So we are the best place to come and visit. All these benefits that European Union has can be used in our diplomacy as well in dealing with our trade partners, especially on the other sides of the Atlantic.
Mrs. Zovko and Mr. Warborn, thank you very much for sharing your thoughts and your insights.
Well, that's all for today. To stay updated on the latest in EU politics, follow us on social media and visit our website at eppgroup.eu. Thanks for listening.